What if the earliest Christian voice you were never meant to hear belonged to a woman? Not just any woman, but Mary Magdalene, confidant witness teacher. Her words survived only in fragments hidden for centuries in the sands of Egypt. A gospel that dares to challenge the power of the apostles, that whispers a vision unlike any found in the Bible you know. And yet, it was silenced. Buried not by accident, but by intention. Why? Because sometimes history isn't written by the victors, it's edited by them. The heat of that question lingers, but now we slow our pace. The world beyond the headlines is quieter, older, and far stranger than we imagine. We'll take our time here tracing the faint outlines of a voice once nearly erased and listening for what it still has to say. You picture it first as dust, slow, warm, and weightless. It rises from the ground when the wind shifts, carrying with it the faint smell of ancient papyrus and the ghost of ink long faded. Somewhere in this imagined landscape, a hand brushes across brittle fibers, and for the first time in centuries, light touches the words again. Not the measured cadence of the Gospels you grew up with, but something leaner, stranger, more urgent. A voice speaking of visions of fear and courage of a woman standing before men who doubt her and not flinching. The idea that such a thing could exist feels almost impossible. Mary Magdalene, in most imaginations, is already a footnote, a repentant sinner, a silent presence at the foot of the cross. But here she speaks, she teaches, she corrects. And the men in these surviving pages do not always like what they hear. The fragments themselves were found far from the grand marble halls of the Vatican or the clean, climate-controlled vaults of modern museums. They surfaced in places where the sand is patient and the air tastes of centuries. Part of a Coptic codex, weathered yet defiant, it slipped through time's grasp to reach us at all. But its survival raises questions as sharp as any sword. Why was this gospel left out of the canon? Why did its author or its community place such weight on Mary's authority? And why does it still provoke discomfort now, nearly 2 millennia later? It's tempting to believe that history is a straight line, that the texts we have today are the natural, inevitable survivors of an open and fair debate. But history is not a democracy. It's a power struggle. And in that struggle, some voices are lifted high, while others are gently or forcefully buried. This gospel is not complete. Whole portions are missing, and the gaps speak almost as loudly as the words we can still read. Scholars argue over what might have filled them: theological insight, controversial claims, or perhaps something so ordinary it would disappoint us entirely. But between the lines, you feel the pulse of something personal, a human voice straining to be heard. Before we venture further into the shadows, take a moment to subscribe so you never miss a secret that history has tried to forget. And so we begin standing at the threshold of a story, both impossibly old and startlingly new, holding in our hands the first fragile pieces of a puzzle that someone long ago hoped we would never solve. Somewhere deep in the dust, the rest of her voice is still waiting. The desert is quiet in a way that feels deliberate, as if it is listening. The air is dry enough to drink the moisture from your breath, and the sun turns every grain of sand into a shard of light. Somewhere between the emptiness of horizon and the weight of the earth below, something ancient is sleeping. It is not a secret hidden behind locked doors or guarded by soldiers. It is buried in the plainest of vaults, the soil itself. And like so many treasures of the past, it waits for chance more than design to be uncovered. It was in Egypt in the late 19th century when fragments of a codex began to surface, though no one knew yet what they had. The story of their emergence is tangled half archaeology, half accident. Villagers digging for fertilizer in ancient mounds stumbled upon papyri that crumbled at the touch, some disappearing into the hands of traders before anyone could read them. That was the way of the desert's archives the earth might give, but it never gave gently. Among these scattered leaves was something that did not match the familiar scriptures, something bearing the name of a woman written in the flowing Coptic hand. The Gospel according to Mary. The fact of its survival at all is astonishing. Papyrus is a fragile thing vulnerable to damp insects and human indifference. And yet the climate of the desert, with its relentless aridity, had wrapped these words in a kind of slow-motion preservation. Even so, when scholars finally examined the fragments, they found a text incomplete with whole sections missing. Pages at the beginning, pages in the middle gone. What remained was enough to intrigue, but not enough to satisfy. An obscure but telling detail emerged in those early studies. The codex that contained Mary's Gospel also carried other works associated with what the Church later called Gnostic thought. Texts that spoke of hidden knowledge, of inner revelation, of a faith less concerned with rules and more with direct experience of the divine. To a modern reader, this association might seem academic, a mere curiosity of compilation. But to those shaping Christianity's earliest boundaries, it would have been a warning flag. The scholarly debate ignited quickly. Some argued the manuscript was a late invention, borrowing Mary's name to lend authority. Others suggested it was genuinely ancient, perhaps even rooted in first-century oral traditions. Radiocarbon dating and linguistic analysis placed the surviving copy in the 5th century, but that told us nothing about when its content was first composed. The range of estimates from the early 2nd century to much later remains a quiet point of contention in academic circles. There was something else too, a thread that would wind its way back into the conversation many times. Among the damaged lines, there are moments where the surviving words are unusually vivid, almost defiant. They depict Mary stepping forward to speak when others fall silent, answering questions about the nature of the soul and recounting a vision that even the male disciples cannot claim to have seen. These flashes of authority are not hidden between the lines. They are in plain sight. And yet for centuries, they were locked away in sand, absent from every pulpit and Sunday reading. You can almost imagine the first modern scholar leaning over those faded characters in a dimly lit study, tracing the letters with their eyes